The rain had just stopped falling when Rebecca Martinez stood outside the Italian restaurant called Bella Vista, her reflection staring back at her from the wet glass doors. She could see every part of herself that the world had taught her to hate: her round face with the dimples that appeared even when she wasn't smiling, her arms that filled out the sleeves of her burgundy dress completely, her stomach that no amount of holding her breath could make disappear. She had spent 2 hours getting ready for this blind date, trying on 7 different outfits before settling on this one because it was the only dress that didn't make her feel like she was pretending to be someone else. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun with a few curls framing her face, and she had even put on the expensive perfume her sister had given her for Christmas. It had been 4 years since her last real date, 4 years since David had told her he loved her personality, but couldn't be with someone who looked like her. Those words had carved themselves into her heart like scars that never quite healed. Rebecca's best friend, Maya, had set up this blind date with someone named Jason from her accounting firm. Maya had sworn he was different, that he cared about personality and intelligence more than appearance. Rebecca had wanted to believe it so badly that she had said yes, even though every part of her screamed that this was a mistake. She walked into the restaurant 15 minutes early, because being late would give her another reason to feel bad about herself. The hostess, a thin woman with a practiced smile, led her to a table near the window where she could watch the streetlights reflect in the puddles outside. Rebecca ordered water with lemon and tried not to fidget with the napkin in her lap. She practiced her smile in the reflection of her spoon, then felt ridiculous and put it down. Other diners filled the restaurant with the comfortable buzz of conversation and laughter. A couple at a nearby table was sharing dessert, feeding each other bites of tiramisu. An elderly man sat alone at the table next to hers, reading a newspaper while eating his soup with elegant precision at exactly 7 o'clock. Jason walked through the door. Rebecca recognized him from the photo Maya had shown her on her phone, tall with sandy brown hair, wearing a blue button-down shirt and dark jeans. He was handsome in that conventional way that made Rebecca's stomach drop because she knew what was coming next. She watched his eyes scan the restaurant until they landed on her. She raised her hand in a small wave, trying to smile despite the dread building in her chest. The change in his expression was immediate and brutal. His friendly smile collapsed into something between disappointment and disgust. He walked toward her table slowly, each step seeming to take enormous effort, as if he was walking through quicksand. When he finally reached the table, he didn't sit down. Instead, he stood there, looking down at her, his eyes moving from her face to her body with an expression that made her want to disappear into the floor. Jason's voice was loud enough that several nearby tables turned to look when he spoke. "You're Rebecca, Maya's friend Rebecca." The way he said it made it clear that he couldn't believe Maya would have a friend who looked like her. Rebecca nodded, her throat suddenly too tight to speak. Jason pulled out the chair across from her, but still didn't sit. Instead, he looked around the restaurant as if checking to see who was watching. Then he leaned down slightly, his voice dripping with contempt. "Maya said you were a little curvy." "This isn't curvy. This is false advertising." "What did you do?" "Send her photos from 10 years ago." The words hit Rebecca like physical blows, each one making her smaller in her seat. A woman at the next table gasped audibly. Someone dropped their fork with a clatter. The elderly man reading his newspaper had stopped mid-bite, his spoon suspended in the air. Rebecca's hands were shaking as she reached for her purse. She wanted to say something, anything, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. All she could think about was how everyone in the restaurant was looking at her, seeing her humiliation, witnessing her worthlessness. Jason wasn't finished. He straightened up and spoke even louder, as if he wanted to make sure everyone heard him. "I don't have time for this. I have standards. Maybe try being honest next time instead of wasting people's evening." He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "And maybe try a salad once in a while." The cruelty of it was so casual, so effortless, as if humiliating her was nothing more than an inconvenience in his evening. Rebecca stood up so quickly that she knocked over her water glass. Ice and liquid spread across the white tablecloth like her dignity spreading thin and disappearing. She grabbed her purse and turned toward the door, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall until she was outside. But before she could take a step, a voice cut through the restaurant's shocked silence. It was deep and commanding, carrying an authority that made everyone, including Jason, freeze in place. "That's enough." The voice belonged to the elderly man at the next table, except when he stood up, Rebecca realized he wasn't elderly at all. He was perhaps in his early 40s, with silver streaking through his dark hair in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. He was wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Rebecca made in 3 months. His presence filled the space in a way that made Jason suddenly look small and cheap. The man walked past Rebecca, briefly touching her elbow in a gesture of support, and positioned himself between her and Jason. "I believe you owe this lady an apology," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel that made it clear this wasn't a request. Jason tried to puff out his chest, to reclaim some of the power he'd felt moments ago. "This isn't any of your business, old man. This is between me and her." The silver-haired man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You made it everyone's business when you decided to humiliate her in public. Now, you have 2 choices. You can apologize to Miss Martinez and leave quietly, or we can discuss your behavior in a way that you'll find much less pleasant." Jason's face went red. "You don't even know her. Why do you care?" The man's expression shifted to something almost pitying. "I care because I'm a human being watching another human being be treated with unconscionable cruelty. The fact that you have to ask why I care says everything about the kind of person you are." The entire restaurant was watching now, forks suspended midway to mouths, conversations completely stopped. Jason looked around, realized he had become the villain in everyone's story, and his bravado crumbled. He muttered something that might have been an apology, and practically ran out of the restaurant. The silver-haired man turned to Rebecca, his entire demeanor changing from threatening to gentle in an instant. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Rebecca realized she was crying, the tears she had been holding back finally breaking free. "I'm so embarrassed," she whispered. "Everyone saw. Everyone heard." The man pulled out a handkerchief from his jacket pocket and offered it to her. It was real cloth, monogrammed with the letters NT in elegant script. "The only person who should be embarrassed is the one who just ran out of here with his tail between his legs," he said. "Would you do me the honor of having dinner with me? I hate eating alone, and I have a feeling you could use some company that actually deserves your time." Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He had kind eyes, brown with flecks of gold, and laugh lines that suggested he smiled often and genuinely. There was something in his expression that made her feel seen, not stared at, but actually seen. "I don't even know your name," she said, managing a small smile through her tears. "Nicholas," he said, extending his hand. "Nicholas Thorne, and I already know you're Rebecca Martinez because that fool announced it to the entire restaurant. Shall we?" He gestured to his table, and something about the way he did it, with a slight bow like she was royalty, made her laugh, despite everything. "Okay," she said, surprising herself. "But I'm warning you, I'm probably going to be terrible company. I might cry into my pasta." Nicholas grinned, and it transformed his face from distinguished to boyish. "Then we'll ask for extra napkins. Come on." As they sat down at his table, the other diners slowly returned to their own conversations, though Rebecca caught several approving smiles, and one older woman gave her a subtle thumbs up. Nicholas pushed the bread basket toward her. Immediately. First rule of recovering from terrible people: carbohydrates help. Second rule: good wine helps more. Nicholas poured her a glass of red wine from the bottle on his table, and Rebecca noticed his hands. They were elegant, but strong, with a few small scars that suggested he did more than just push papers around a desk. "So, Nicholas Thorne," she said, taking a sip of wine that probably cost more than her entire outfit. "What brings you to Bella Vista on a Thursday night, besides rescuing women from horrible blind dates?" He laughed, a warm sound that made something in Rebecca's chest. "Lucine, would you believe me if I said I come here every Thursday? It's my thinking spot. I run a company, and sometimes I need to get away from the office to actually think clearly. Plus, they make the best carbonara in the city." Rebecca found herself relaxing, despite the trauma of the last few minutes. "What kind of company?" she asked. "Technology. Mostly artificial intelligence applications for healthcare. Boring stuff to most people, but I find it fascinating. We're working on diagnostic tools that could help doctors catch diseases earlier." His eyes lit up when he talked about it, and Rebecca found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested. "That doesn't sound boring at all," she said. "It sounds like you're trying to save lives." Nicholas looked pleased by her response. "That's the goal. What about you? What do you do when you're not being subjected to the worst of humanity?" Rebecca laughed, surprising herself again. "I'm a teacher, 5th grade. So I'm subjected to humanity at its most chaotic every day, but at least 10-year-olds have an excuse for their behavior." They talked through the appetizers that Nicholas insisted on ordering for them to share. Rebecca found herself telling him about her students, about the boy who brought her drawings every morning, about the girl who had finally learned to read after months of struggle. Nicholas listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention. When their main courses arrived, Rebecca had almost forgotten about Jason entirely. "Can I ask you something?" Nicholas said, twirling his fork in his carbonara. "Why did you agree to go on a blind date? You seem like someone who would have plenty of options." Rebecca nearly choked on her ravioli. "Plenty of options? You're kidding, right? Look at me." Nicholas set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "I am looking at you. I see a beautiful woman with an expressive face and eyes that light up when she talks about her students. I see someone who was brave enough to show up tonight, even though dating is terrifying. I see someone who hasn't let one cruel person ruin her entire evening, which shows remarkable resilience. So I'll ask again, why the blind date?" Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's been 4 years since my last relationship ended. He told me he loved everything about me except how I looked. After that, I just stopped trying. But my friend, Maya, wouldn't stop pestering me about giving Jason a chance. She said he was different. I wanted to believe people could see past the surface." Nicholas was quiet for a moment, then he said something that made Rebecca's heart skip. "People who can't see past the surface aren't worth seeing at all. My wife passed away 6 years ago. She battled cancer for 2 years before that. I watched her body change, watched her lose her hair, lose weight, then gain it back from medications. She worried constantly that I wouldn't find her attractive anymore, but she was wrong. She became more beautiful to me every day because I could see her strength, her humor in the face of fear, her determination to squeeze every drop of joy from whatever time we had left. That's when I learned that anyone who judges beauty by weight or conventional standards is living in a very small, very sad world." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different tears. "I'm so sorry about your wife." Nicholas smiled softly. "Thank you. She would have liked you. She was a teacher too, high school English. She always said teachers were the real heroes, showing up every day to shape young minds, despite being underpaid and underappreciated." They continued talking through dessert, which Nicholas insisted they ordered despite Rebecca's protests that she was full. "Never trust someone who doesn't believe in dessert," he said with mock seriousness. "It's a character flaw," he ordered. The chocolate lava cake with 2 spoons, and they ate it together while he told her about his wife's belief that chocolate could solve most of life's problems. Rebecca found herself laughing more than she had in months, maybe years. Nicholas had a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her snort with laughter, which made him laugh too. Other diners glanced over at them, but now it was with smiles, rather than pity or curiosity. They looked like two people enjoying each other's company, which, Rebecca realized with surprise, they were. As the evening wound down and the restaurant began to empty, Nicholas called for the check. Rebecca reached for her purse, but he waved her off. Absolutely not. This is my treat. You provided the company, which was worth far more than dinner. They walked outside together, where the air had turned cool and crisp after the rain. The sidewalk still glistened under the streetlights, and the city felt washed clean. Thank you, Rebecca said, turning to face him. Not just for dinner, but for standing up for me, for making the worst night I've had in years turn into one of the best. Nicholas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. I would very much like to see you again, if you're interested. No pressure, no expectations. Maybe just coffee sometime, or dinner if you're feeling brave enough to risk another restaurant with me. Rebecca took the card, running her finger over the embossed letters. Nicholas Thorne, CEO MedTech Innovations. You're a CEO, she said, looking up at him in surprise. You didn't mention that part? He shrugged. It's just a title. It doesn't define who I am, any more than your weight defines who you are. We're all so much more than the labels people put on us. Rebecca made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. I would love to have coffee with you, but I should warn you, I'm a disaster before my morning coffee. You might regret it. Nicholas laughed. I'll take my chances. Disaster, Rebecca sounds interesting. He waited with her until her rideshare arrived, making sure she got in safely. As the car pulled away, Rebecca looked back to see him still standing there, watching to make sure she left safely. She clutched his business card like a talisman, a reminder that not all people were like Jason. The next morning, Rebecca woke up to a text from an unknown number. Good morning, Rebecca. This is Nicholas. I wanted to make sure you got home safely last night, and to thank you again for salvaging my Thursday evening. If you're free this Saturday, there's a coffee shop near the park that makes the best lavender honey latte in the city. No pressure, but I promise to defend you from any more investment bankers with delusions of superiority. Rebecca laughed out loud, startling her cat, who had been sleeping on her stomach. She typed back, "How did you know he was an investment banker?" The response came quickly. The expensive but tasteless shirt, the unnecessarily loud voice, and the complete lack of human empathy. Classic investment banker. So, Saturday. Rebecca looked at herself in the mirror across from her bed. She saw the same body that Jason had rejected, but somehow it looked different now. Not smaller or more acceptable, just hers. A body that had carried her through college, through years of teaching, through heartbreak and joy. A body that deserved respect and kindness, not cruel judgment. She typed back, "Saturday sounds perfect, but I should warn you, I take my coffee very seriously. If this place doesn't live up to your recommendation, there will be consequences." His response made her smile. "I would expect nothing less. See you Saturday at 10 a.m. I'll be the one defending the lavender honey latte's honor." Rebecca set down her phone and got ready for work, humming as she picked out her clothes. Her fifth graders noticed her good mood immediately. "Miss Martinez, you're extra happy today," observed Lucy, the class's most perceptive student. "Did something good happen?" Rebecca thought about Nicholas, about his kindness, about the way he had made her feel valued and seen. "Yes, Lucy," she said. "Something very good happened. I remembered that I deserve to be treated with respect, and that there are still good people in the world who understand that." Saturday came faster than Rebecca expected. She changed her outfit 3 times, before settling on jeans and a soft purple sweater that made her feel comfortable and confident. The coffee shop was exactly as charming as Nicholas had promised, with exposed brick walls, plants hanging from the ceiling, and the rich smell of roasting coffee beans. Nicholas was already there when she arrived, reading a book at a corner table. He stood up when he saw her, pulling out her chair, and Rebecca noticed several women in the shop watching him with interest, but his attention was entirely on her. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Did you think I wouldn't?" she asked. "After Thursday night, I wouldn't have blamed you for never wanting to risk a public outing again," he said. "But I'm very glad you're here." They talked for 3 hours, their coffee growing cold as they lost themselves in conversation. Nicholas told her about growing up as the scholarship kid at a prep school, always feeling out of place. Rebecca shared her struggles with her weight. Since childhood, the diets that never worked, the cruel comments that never stopped hurting. They discovered they both loved mystery novels, hated reality TV, and had complicated relationships with their families. Nicholas made her laugh with stories about his disasters in the kitchen, and Rebecca found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone in years. When they finally noticed the time, the lunch crowd was starting to arrive. "Would you like to take a walk in the park?" Nicholas asked. "I promise to protect you from any joggers who might judge our pace." Rebecca laughed. "Our pace? Are you saying you're not a runner either?" "I believe running should only be done if something is chasing you," he said solemnly. "And even then, I'd prefer to negotiate." They walked slowly through the park, enjoying the autumn colors and the comfortable silence that fell between their conversations. Children played on the playground while their parents watched from benches. Dogs chased balls and frisbees across the grass. It was beautifully ordinary, and Rebecca realized this was what she had been missing. Not grand romantic gestures or perfect dates, but simple companionship with someone who saw her as a complete person. As they circled back toward the park entrance, Nicholas said something that stopped Rebecca in her tracks. "I need to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't scare you away. I really like you, Rebecca. Not because I feel sorry for you, or because I'm trying to prove something about myself. I like your humor, your intelligence, your passion for teaching. I like how your eyes crinkle when you really laugh, and how you use your hands when you talk about something that excites you. I haven't felt this way about anyone since my wife died, and it's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." Rebecca felt her heart racing. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again, but a bigger part, the part that had shown up to that disastrous blind date in the first place, wanted to be brave. "I like you too," she said softly, "but I'm scared. People like you don't usually see people like me, and I don't mean that as self-pity, just as fact. You're successful, handsome, and could have anyone you want." Nicholas took her hand gently. "First of all, people like me are just people, with fears and flaws and insecurities, like everyone else. Second, I don't want anyone. I want to get to know you better, if you'll let me. And third, you need to stop categorizing yourself as less than. You're not less than anything or anyone. You're Rebecca Martinez, teacher, mystery novel enthusiast, terrible joke teller, and survivor of the worst blind date in history. That's more than enough." They stood there in the park entrance, holding hands while people moved around them like water around stones. Rebecca thought about Jason, about David, about all the people who had made her feel worthless because of her size. Then she looked at Nicholas, who was waiting patiently for her to process what he had said, not pushing or demanding an answer. "Okay," she said finally, "let's see where this goes. But we go slow, and you have to promise to be honest with me. If you change your mind, if you realize you can't handle being with someone who looks like me, you tell me right away. Don't pretend, don't try to spare my feelings. Just be honest." Nicholas squeezed her hand. "I promise to be honest. But Rebecca, I need you to promise something too. Promise you'll try to see yourself the way I see you. Not all at once, but little by little." Because the woman I see is extraordinary, and she deserves to know it. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in front of her bathroom mirror, getting ready for another date with Nicholas. They had taken things slow, as promised, starting with coffee dates and lunches, gradually moving to dinners and movies, weekend trips to museums and bookstores. Nicholas had met her teacher friends, who adored him immediately. She had met his business partners, who welcomed her warmly into their circle. There had been moments of doubt, times when someone stared at them in public, and Rebecca wondered what Nicholas was doing with her. But he seemed to have a sixth sense for these moments, always finding a way to reassure her without making a big deal about it. A hand on her back, a whispered joke, a kiss on her temple that made her forget anyone else existed. The biggest test had come when Nicholas invited her to his company's annual gala. Rebecca had panicked, imagining a room full of thin, elegant women judging her. She had almost backed out 3 times. But Nicholas had taken her shopping, not to change her, but to find a dress that made her feel powerful. They had found a deep emerald gown that flowed beautifully over her curves, and when she had walked into that ballroom on Nicholas's arm, she had felt beautiful, not because she looked different, but because she was finally starting to believe she deserved to be there. Several people had asked Nicholas who his stunning date was, and he had introduced her with such obvious pride that Rebecca had actually started to believe the compliment was genuine. Tonight was special. Nicholas had been mysteriously insistent about the restaurant choice, a place they had never been before. He seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. Rebecca wore the burgundy dress from that first horrible blind date, reclaiming it as a symbol of how far she had come. When she arrived at the restaurant, Nicholas was waiting outside, pacing slightly. "You're wearing the dress," he said, his face lighting up. "I thought it deserved a better memory," she said. "That night changed my life, just not in the way I expected." Nicholas took her hand and led her inside. The restaurant was beautiful, all soft lighting and white tablecloths. But what made Rebecca gasp was the table he led her to. It was set for more than 2. Her sister Isabella was there, along with her parents, Nicholas's business partner James, and his wife, her best friend, Maya, who was crying already, her favorite students from over the years, now teenagers and young adults, all the people who had mattered in her journey. "What is this?" Rebecca asked, her voice shaking. Nicholas got down on one knee, and the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "Rebecca Martinez," he said, his voice strong and clear. 6 months ago, you walked into a restaurant expecting rejection, and instead found someone who had been waiting for you without even knowing it. You've taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone whose imperfections complement your own. You've shown me that beauty isn't about size or shape, but about the light someone brings into the world. And you've brought so much light into mine." He pulled out a ring box, opening it to reveal a vintage sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "This was my grandmother's ring. She was a teacher too, and she would have loved you. Rebecca, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how extraordinary you are?" Rebecca couldn't speak through her tears, but she nodded, dropping to her knees to kiss him, while everyone around them erupted in cheers. As Nicholas slipped the ring onto her finger, she heard Jason's cruel voice in her memory one last time, then let it fade away forever. She had been rejected for being too fat on that blind date, but it had led her to someone who saw her as exactly enough. The CEO at the next table hadn't just defended her that night. He had been waiting for her, preparing to love someone who had been told she was unlovable. And in learning to love him back, Rebecca had finally learned to love herself. The obese girl, who had been rejected on her blind date, was now the beloved woman saying yes to forever, surrounded by people who saw her true worth. And that was the most beautiful transformation of all. Later that night, after all the congratulations and happy tears, after the champagne toasts and the promises to help plan the wedding, Nicholas and Rebecca stood outside the restaurant where it had all began. I have a confession, Nicholas said, pulling her close. That night wasn't the first time I had seen you. I had been at that restaurant 3 weeks earlier for a business dinner. You were there with your teacher friends, celebrating someone's birthday? You were laughing so hard at something that you snorted, then laughed even harder at yourself. You were so alive, so genuinely joyful. I couldn't stop watching you. I came back every Thursday hoping to see you again, and then that night, there you were. When that idiot insulted you, I wasn't just angry at his cruelty. I was angry that he was too stupid to see what I had seen, who you really were. Rebecca looked up at him in amazement. You came back every Thursday, just hoping to see me again? Nicholas nodded. I know it sounds strange, but there was something about you. When I saw what Jason was doing to you, I couldn't just sit there. Not because I felt sorry for you, but because I had been hoping for a chance to talk to you, and he was ruining it with his ignorance. Rebecca stood on her tiptoes to kiss him. Thank you for being at the next table. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for waiting for me to believe I was worth loving. As they walked hand in hand into their future, Rebecca thought about all the women who had been rejected for their size, their appearance, their failure to meet someone else's standards. She wanted to tell them all that rejection might be the beginning of something beautiful, that the right person would see them as perfect, exactly as they were. The story of the obese girl, who was rejected for being too fat on her blind date, became legend among their friends and family. It was told at their wedding, where Rebecca walked down the aisle in a dress that celebrated every curve, to marry a man who had fallen in love with all of her. It was told at dinner parties where couples shared their own stories of finding love in unexpected places. It was told to Rebecca's students when they felt rejected or alone. Proof that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, and every time the story was told, it ended the same way. The CEO at the next table didn't just change one night. He changed a life, a future, a woman's entire understanding of her own worth. And that obese girl, who was rejected for being too fat, she became the beloved wife, the cherished teacher, the woman who finally knew she had always been enough.